yesterday, and to speak about the thank you. Our shir this morning is dedicated by Paul and Kathy Pollack this month in commemoration of the yardates of Paul's parents, Shmuel ben Zechariah and Sarah bas Avram Zichronon Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family Einuchama. So with that, remember again, the Mishnah said that Shiluach HaKein, sending away the mother bird, only applies to Chullin animals, not to Mukdashin animals, not to Kodesh animals. Amaylo. So why is that? The Amr Kra, because the pasuk says Shaliach Tishalach Es Ha'im. Send away the mother. Send away the mother. So Shiluach HaKein only applies to a bird that you are obligated to send away. This comes to exclude a bird that you are not mechuyev to go ahead and send away, but rather that you are obligated to bring to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Gizbar. Obviously, if you're Makadish a bird, you're Makadish an animal, you're obligated to bring that to the Beis HaMikdash. Ravina says, therefore, interesting application of this concept. Therefore, if you have a kosher bird, right, that chas v'shalom killed someone, such a bird is pater from shiluach. Pater from shiluach. My timer. What's the reason? Damar kra shaliach tishalach es ha'im. Because the pasuk says, send away the mother. So you only are obligated to send away the mother bird when there's a din shiluach. This comes to exclude a bird that you are not obligated to send away, but rather that you are obligated to go ahead and bring to Beis Din. I will say, if an animal kills a human being, that animal, so to speak, is sentenced by Beis Din and is put to death. So the Gemara says, Heichi Dami, what's the case? If the animal was already judged, found liable to be executed, tap of koflamites, barktalu, then it's sentenced to death. It's already barktala. Obviously, there's no din of shiluach hakein. Ela delo gamar dine. Rather, what's the case where the animal has not yet been sentenced? Uboy la'asuye lebeidine, and ultimately, again, you need to bring it to Beis Din. V'kayume bei ube'arta ram bekebecha, in order to fulfill the obligation of expunge the evil from within your midst. To which the Gemara says, Hani mukdashin hechidami. What's the case of a mukdash animal? Ilema. So now we've just established that ultimately, again, so exceptions to this rule. If a bird is supposed to be executed because it killed someone, it is part from shiluach hakein. Good. Next case. What about hegdish? So we said that an animal that is hegdish, a bird that is hegdish, is not subject to shiluach hakein. To which the Gemara says, hechidami. What is the case? Here we go. Say if you want to say that it was a nest inside of my house, and I sanctified the nest. Would such a nest ever be subject to the obligation of shiluach hakein? After all, ki kari kansipor prat l'mezuman. If you remember again, in the Mishnah explained that in order to be subject to the obligation of kansipor, what's the halacha? It has to be baderech. It can't be prepared. On a bos meisach level means it can't be owned by me. If it's already owned by me, then it's not subject to shiluach hakein. Ella dechaza kain ba'alma. Rather, it has to be, I saw a nest out in the Welt. Right? I saw a nest out in the world. So one second. Va'aktishay, and I was makdish the nest. So the Gemara says that doesn't work. Umi kadosh Rabbi say, if I'm walking down the road and I see a bird's nest and I say that bird's nest is hegdish, does that create hegdish? So the Gemara says, after all, ish ki yakdish as beiso kodesh. Amar Achmana. So we'll say the Torah gives an example of a person who will be makdish his home. So we'll say this teaches us an important halacha vis-a-vis hegdish. So the Gemara says, ma beiso b'shuso, just like my home is owned by me, af kol b'shuso. So to Rabbi say, your only ability to make something hegdish is if what? If it's owned by you. In other words, you can't make something hefker, hektish. You must first go ahead and own it, and only then can you make it hektish, which makes sense. We'll say hektish, right, is a din in ownership. Now this is actually very interesting. Now obviously, we'll say, so what does this do? This creates a little bit of a complicated situation vis-a-vis shiluach hakein. Why? Elas, Rabbi says, so what has to be the case? Dag binu la'afrochim, v'akdishinu v'hadr hadrinu. So we'll say, so what's the case? I come to a bird's nest, I lift up the chicks, I acquire them, I'm makdish them, and then I put them back in the nest. So the Gemara says that won't work. So the Gemara says B'chulin nami lo mechayev. We'll say once I do that, once I pick up the chicks, so the mitzvah of shiluach hakan is done. This sanya, because we learned not alas habanim vechzirun lakan. So we'll say if I take the chicks out of the nest and then I go ahead and return them back to the nest, and then the mother comes back and sits on the nest. Pater mi the shaleach. I'm part of Shulakin. We'll say, in other words, once I perform some act of ownership on the nest, on the chicks, then the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKain is done. So therefore, we're trying to figure out what's the case ultimately where what? What's the case where halacha l'maisa I'm going to be makdish? What's the case where I'm going to be makdish the nest or makdish the? What's the case of hekdish by Shiluach HaKain? Ella de'agba le'eim va'akdish shava hadra. So it says maybe what's the case? I'm makdish the mother. I lift up the mother, I go ahead and makdish her, and then she goes back and sits on the nest. To which the Gemara says, Meikara ichayev le b'shiluach, hashta b'shiluach, mikamei da'akdasha. So we'll say ultimately again, in this case, she was originally chayev and shiluach, or subject to shiluach hakein, before I was makdish her. The Sanyar, we'll say first wide line, Kuf Lamed Tesam Adalef. The Sanyar, Rabbi Yochanan ben Yosef Omer, Hikdish chaya va'achakach shachta. We'll say if a person was makdish a chaya and then afterwards shechted the animal, then an animal is pata from kisei hadam. Shachta va'achar kach hichdisha. But if halacha l'maisa you shechted the animal and then only afterwards will you makdish it, then what? Chayiv lechasos. In that case, there's an obligation of kisui. Why? Shekvarnis chayiv b'kisui kodem sheyavo lidei hekdish. Because we'll say in that case over here, where ultimately again the obligation of kisui set in when? At the time of shchita, and then ultimately I was only makdish it afterwards. I'm chayiv in kisei hadam. Shekvarnis chayiv b'kisui kodem sheyavo lidei hekdish. So Rav Amar, so we'll say, so we're still trying to figure out the case of what is the hekdish case by shiluach hakein. So Rav gives a different interpretation. Rav says, "B'makdish peiros shovcho umardo." Interesting case. So that's we'll say what happens. I have a dovecote. I'm makdish my dovecote. Now the truth is that you could do because the dovecote is considered to be owned property. So I'm makdish the dovecote umardo. We'll say mardu means what? Mardu means the doves run away. They run away after that. They escape. They literally, what is the expression? Fly the coop, right? They literally fled the coop. So what happens? So both say. So Rav says that's a case where what? Where ultimately the animal is hegdish, and now what happens? Now let's say I'm walking down the street. I go ahead and I see my bird roosting somewhere on the derech. What's the halacha? The halacha is such a bird is potter from shiluach hakein. Ushmuel Amar Shmuel says, B'makdish tarnagalto lebedek habayis. Well, this is an interesting case. Shmuel says, what's the case? Where I was makdish my chicken for bedek habayis. I will remember again. Bedek habayis means what? Bedek habayis means monetary sanctity. Right? Not kedushas haguf, but kedushas mamon, kedushas domim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Shmuel says that the case over here is where I'm makdish my chicken for bedek habayis. Now if you look at Rashi says, actually not yet. So the Gemara says, watch this. Bishlam Shmuel Omar Karav. So I understand why Shmuel doesn't subscribe to Rav's idea to come Okim Lebe Kadshe Bedek Habayis. Because ultimately Shmuel would rather set up the case of Kadshe Bedek Habayis rather than Kadshe Damim. Ela Rav, my time Omar Kishmuel. But why doesn't Rav go ahead and hold like Shmuel? Omar L'charav, Rav says, Dafko Kapachi Mishiluach Kigon Peros Shovcho. The Kadshe Mizbeachninu. So we'll listen to this. The lav kodshe mizbeach the kedushas damim ba'amuhu kevan demarda palka kedushas sayu v'chayav shul. So this is actually very interesting. Rav says that the reason he doesn't hold like Shmuel is as follows. Rav wants to suggest that there is a fundamental distinction between kedushas damim and kedushas haguf, monetary sanctity versus physical sanctity. Physical sanctity always remains with the animal no matter what happens. Even if the animal runs away, that's what it means, mardu, rebelled. That physical sanctity always remains. Monetary sanctity, conversely, only applies when halach l'maisa, the animal is under the dominion of the owner. But once the animal flees from the owner and is no longer under the control of the owner, that monetary sanctity dissipates as well. Therefore, Rav does not want to set up the case like Shmuel, dealing with Kadshe Bedek Habayis. Shmuel, what will Shmuel say? This is actually quite amazing. Shmuel will say, Kol Heicha Di Isei Bebe Gaza Dirachmana Isei. Shmuel says, even if the animal runs away, the monetary sanctity does not dissipate. Why? Because wherever the animal goes, it's considered to be in the treasury of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'll say, what does that mean? That ultimately, K'dichsiv, as the pasuk says, La Shem Haaretz Umlo'o. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Rav says that monetary sanctity is only meaningful when the animal is under the ownership of the owner. But once the animal runs away, that monetary sanctity dissipates. Shmuel will say, not true. Even though the animal has run away from me and it's no longer under my control, the world belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it's considered to be in the treasury of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore again that sanctity sticks. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yochanan subscribes to this idea as well. So remember again, we're focusing on a very specific situation. We're just trying to figure out what is the case of an animal which became hekdish, which is no longer subject to the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKein. So Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. So Rav likes the case of where you've been makdish your dovecotes. One of the doves runs away, settles out somewhere in the wild. You come across that nest out in the wild. You're not obligated in Shiluach HaKein because that animal is hekdish. Shmuel says, no, I prefer the case of someone who was makdish a chicken for Bedek Habayis. So remember again, a chicken can never have Kedushas Haguf, right? Can never have Kedushas Haguf. Why not? Why not? Because you don't offer up chicken as karbanos. There are no chicken karbanos. So because that it never has Kedushas Haguf, the most you can be makdish it as is as Kedushas Damim. And Shmuel will say, what's the case? The case is where ultimately you are makdish your chicken for Bedek Habayis, chicken runs away, you find it afterwards and find it sitting on its eggs. You are not obligated to chase away the chicken before you take the eggs. So what's coming out over here is the fundamental difference between Rav and Shmuel is the way that Kedushas Damim works. How does financial sanctity work? Rav will say financial sanctity is only in effect when the animal is under the ownership or under the dominion of the owner. Shmuel will say that even if the animal escapes, the Kedushas Damim still remains. So the Gemara goes out to Rabbi Yochanan, B'makdish Tarnagot Lebedek Habayis Umarda. And Rabbi Yochanan subscribes to the view of Shmuel. Amrali Rabbi Shimon Reish Lakish. So listen to this. Amrali Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Reish Lakish says as follows: V'cheivan shemarda pakele kedushasa. So Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, but I don't understand. Once the animal runs away, once the chicken runs away, halacha l'maaseh, its financial sanctity should dissipate. Amrali bebegaza derachmana isei. Even though the animal has run away from its human owner, it still remains in the treasury of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. D'chsiv la shema aretz umloa. As the pasuk says, the entire world belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To which the Gemara says, V'ramid Rabbi Yochanan, V'ramid Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So we'll say now what we have over here is a stira. We are going to find a contradiction between the opinions of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So let's remember again, so far, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are having the same machlokes as Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi Yochanan holds like Shmuel, namely he wants to set up the case of the hekdish bird as a case of a chicken, based on the idea that monetary sanctity does not dissipate even if the animal runs away. Reish Lakish holds like Rav, namely he doesn't like the case of the chicken because he will hold that monetary sanctity does dissipate if the animal runs away. So here we go. So the Gemara says, "De'itmar mana zeh lebedek habayis." If a person says, "I hereby pledge a mana to bedek habayis," which also means what? Monetary sanctity, right? I'm pledging money to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, which is kedushas damim. Now what happens? V'nignevu o ne'evdu. And what happens? The money is stolen or it's lost. So of course, what's the shaila now? What's the shaila? What is my liability? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chai Bachri Yusan. Ad Shavoli de Gizbar. Rabbi Yochanan says, ultimately, I am responsible for the money until it reaches the hands of the temple treasurer. So we'll say, scenarios, the responsibility of the money is mine until I deliver it to the Beis Hamikdash. Reish Lakish says, Kol heicha di isei bebegaza derachmana isei. Rish Lakish says no. And this is amazing. Even though it's not in my hands, it's already in the coffers of God. In other words, what's supposed to happen already happened. It's in the coffers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. After all, why is that? T'chsiv la shema aretz umlo. So we'll say, see what just happened over here? The exact reverse of the shitos. Kasha d'Reish Lakish ad Reish Lakish, kasha d'Rabbi Yochanan ad Rabbi Yochanan. To which the Gemara says, no, it's not. D'Reish Lakish ad Reish Lakish lo kasha. We'll say, it's not steer in Reish Lakish. Why not? Hamikamei d'Shamei b'Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. We'll say, remember again, Rabbi Yochanan is Reish Lakish's Rabbi. So ultimately, again, this was before that ultimately Reish Lakish heard from Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, they're both saying, originally Reish Lakish thought that when something has financial sanctity, if the item runs away or quote unquote is stolen, the financial sanctity goes away. Then he learned from his Rabbi Yochanan that is not the case. That ultimately financial sanctity remains, even if the animal runs away, even if the money is stolen. So he retracted. So what about Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan kasha. But Rabbi said, what about Rabbi Yochanan's contradiction in himself? Rabbi Yochanan nami lo kasha, hada amar alai, hada amar harezu. Both say fascinating distinction. Everything depends on how you say it, right? If you say, I will say, for example, if you were to go ahead and say, Hare alai mana lebedek habayis. If you were to say, I hereby take upon myself to bring a mana to the Beis Hamikdash, and I will say, ultimately, again, that mana is stolen or lost. What's the halacha? You are still on the hook. You're obligated to go ahead and replace it. Why? Because the way you articulated the obligation is how? On you. Masha'inkein, if you say Hare zu, I'm going to give this mana to the Beis Hamikdash, and something happens to this mana, then what is the halacha? The halacha is if something happens, it's stolen or lost, then what? You're off the hook. You're off the hook. So therefore, I will say, so Rabbi Yochanan will say, I'm not contradicting myself. When I said that if a person said mana zu, the bedek habayis, and it gets lost, or stolen, that you're no longer obligated to replace it, that's because the person was saying mana zu, this mana. Something happens to the mana, I'm off the hook. So to which the Gemara says, Mechlal Reish Lakish, afa gav do amar alai lo mechayiv. I will say, now again, the problem with saying that is, remember, Reish Lakish disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan. So you're telling me now that Reish Lakish holds that if a person were to say mana alai, I hereby take upon myself to bring a mana, that ultimately again he would not be chayiv to replace that if something happened to it. Vatanya, we learned ezuhu neder ve'ezuhu nedava. We'll say, what is the distinction between a neder and nedava? Now remember again, we translate neder as a vow and nedava as a voluntary item. But halachically, what's the difference between the two of them? A very important distinction. Ha'omer hare alai ola nedava. Let's say if a person says, I hereby take upon myself an obligation to bring an ola, that is a nedava, right? However, ha'omer hare zu ola, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Ezu neder ve'ezu nedava. Neder ha'omer hare alai. Let's say, so what's a neder? A person says, hare alai, I hereby take upon myself. So neder is where I frame the obligation on myself. Hare alai. Ola. Nidava, what's a nidava? Ha'omer hare zu ola. So a person says, this is an ola. So what is the distinction? Uma bein neder l'nidava. So we'll say, here we go. Neder, meisa o migneva. If you have a neder, if the animal died or was stolen. So what's the halacha? Meisa o migneva sha'avda, chai b'achriyusa. So also when it comes to a neder, because you said what? Hare alai. Hare alai, the obligation is upon me. Therefore, what? Therefore, Allah says something happens to the animal, I'm obligated to replace it. Nedava, on the other hand, mesa, o nignava, o sha'avda, but in the case of a nedava, if it died, or if it was stolen, or if it was lost, eino chayev ba'achriyusa. Ultimately, again, I will not be chayiv, ultimately in liability of that animal. Why? Because ultimately the obligation devolved upon the animal, not upon me. Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish says, 1 second. So we'll say, so first of all, it just appears that everyone holds of this distinction of harezu versus hare alai. Right? Harezu, ultimately, if something happens to the object, then the vower, I should say the person who made the obligation, we'll just call it the person, is exempt, versus when he says hare alai, if something happens to the object, the person is obligated in replacement. Amar l'charish lakish, Rish Lakish will say, Hani mili kadshem izbeach, the mechusar hakrava. When do we make this distinction between harezu and hare alai? Only by kadshem mizbeach, only by items that ultimately, again, have to be offered up on the mizbeach. Why? The mechusar hakrava. Because we'll look at Rashi just a moment. The mechusar hakrava, techi amar alai. When a person says alai, what is he really saying? Hachi kamar alai, alai lahaviu la'azara. Aval bedek habayis kamar b'hafrashaso. Listen to this incredible distinction. So Rish Lakish will say as follows. When do we make a distinction between harezu and hare alai? That's by kodshim izbeach. That's by items offered up in the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll say, now watch this. When a person says hare alai ola, what is he really saying? Right? If we drill down, what is he saying? It's incumbent upon me to bring an ola. What does it mean? It's incumbent upon me to bring an ola. What does that mean? What does that mean? It's incumbent upon me to deliver this animal to the Beis Hamikdash. That's what it means. And if I fail to deliver this animal to the Beis Hamikdash, again, if I say alai, then it means I must bring a replacement. If I said harezu, right, harezu, this one, then if something happens to that animal, I'm off the hook. That's true when it comes to karbanos. But when a person says hare alai by bedak habayis, so let's say I say hare alai mana zula Beis Hamikdash. I hereby take upon myself to give this mana, right? It's upon me to give a mana to the Beis Hamikdash. Rish Lakish posits that even if you say alai in that case, if something happens to the mana, you are not responsible to replace it. Why not? This is amazing. Aval kadshe bedek habayis. Delav mechusar akrava. Supposed to be Rish Lakish says something dramatically amazing. Because when it comes to kadshe bedek habayis, which are not missing hakrava, do not need to be offered, afagav de amr alai lo mechayiv. They both say, even though he said alai, if he loses it, he's not chayiv. They both say, now listen, this is absolutely wild. Rish Lakish is saying like this, going back to the idea that lahashema aretz umla'o, the entire world belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which means what? If I go ahead and I say, Manazu alai lebedek habayis, I should say no. Hare alai mana lebedek habayis. I hereby take upon myself to bring a mana to the Beis Hamikdash. And how what happens? I set aside a mana, the money gets lost. So Rabbi Yochanan will say, what's the halacha? What's the halacha? Replacement. You said alai, you said it's upon me, not upon the other, so I have to replace it. Rish Lakish says, no you don't. Why? Because at the end of the day, what was your obligation? Your obligation was to deliver this to the ownership of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is the money in the ownership of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And the answer is yes. Why? Because ultimately, again, the world in its entirety belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that somebody stole it, the fact that somebody found it, it is in the property of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, again, I have fulfilled my obligation. We'll say, so this is very interesting. So in Rabbi Yochanan's world, it's really fascinating. In Rabbi Yochanan's world, he makes the classic distinction between harezu and hare alai in terms of personal liability. Harezu, right, means the obligation is really quote unquote upon the object, and if something happens to the object, it's lost or it's stolen, I don't have an obligation to replace it. As opposed to if I say hare alai, I'm taking upon myself personal responsibility, and therefore if something happens, I have an obligation to replace it. Rish Lakish understands that no, the distinction is actually more between kadshe bedek habayis and kadshe aguf. That when something is kadshe bedek habayis, whether you say alai or zu, at the end of the day, there's no obligation for replacement. Why? Because wherever the object is, you have fulfilled your responsibility by delivering it to the ownership of God. Masha'in king kadshe mizbeach, which are karbanos, really when you say hare alai, what you're taking upon yourself is an obligation to deliver the animal to a specific location. What is that specific location? The Beis Hamikdash. Failure to comply with that requires you, if you say hare alai, to furnish the Beis Hamikdash with a new animal. Really incredible. V'hatanan, we learned, ha'omer shar zeh ola, bayis zeh karban. Person says this shar is an ola. This home right, is a carbon, right? Meaning when you say bayis a carbon, what you're doing is that's katshe bedek habayis. So ultimately, again, meis hashar nafal habayis in chay b'achri yusan. Ultimately, if something happens to the shar dies, or the home falls down, you are not obligated ultimately again in achrayis. Yet, if we say shar ze'alai, ola, bayis ze'alai carbon, I will say if I use lashon of alai, then what's the halacha? Meis hashar v'nafal habayis chayiv l'shalim. Something happens, the shar dies, or the home falls down, we'll say, what's the halacha? The halacha ultimately is I'm chayiv to go ahead and repay. Now, if you look at Rashi, if you notice again, Rashi brings down over, if you notice over here, the Gemara is not making a distinction between kadshe bedek habayis and kadshe mizbeach. At the end of the day, we're just making the distinction between alai and zu. Hanimi lihecha demeis hashar v'nafal habayis. So the Gemara says, no, that case is different. Why? Because if the shar is dead, or the home has fallen down, even Reish Lakish will agree that chayiv l'shalim delesnu. We'll say in this case over here, when the shar is dead, the shar no longer exists. In this case, where the home falls down, the home no longer exists. Aval hecha de'isnuhu. But if the item still exists, like in a case where it's stolen or it's lost, kol hecha de'isei bebegaza derachman de'isei. Wherever it currently is, it is in the coffers, right? It is in the treasury of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. D'chsiv la'Hashem ha'aretz u'mlo'o. Amra Hamnuna, Hakomodim be'erchin, Afagav de Amra alai lo mechayis. Well, see, that's very interesting. Rav Hamnuna says as follows: Erchin. Supposed to remember again. Erchin is a person says Erki alai. I hereby pledge my value to the Beis Hamikdash. And then I set aside that amount of money. So Rav Hamnuna says everyone agrees that Allah Lamaisa, when it comes to erech vows, erchin, if I write akol modim be'erchin afagav de amr alai lo mechayiv. Everyone agrees that even if I say erki alai, right, that my erech value is upon me, that ultimately what? That I am not chayiv to go ahead and replace the money. I'm not chayiv to replace the money if something happens to it. My time, what's the reason? De lo mitmar below alai. Because the problem is when making an erech vow, there is no other way to phrase the vow except with the word alai. In other words, I'm not saying alai specifically because I'm looking to generate a personal responsibility. Rather, I'm saying alai because there is no other way to say it. Heichi lema, what should I say? Lema arki, should I just say the word my value? Aman. Right? Who is that obligation upon? Lema erech ploni. Should I just say the value of ploni? Aman. Again, who is that obligation? Who does that obligation devolve upon? Maskif la rava. Lema hareini be'erki. Hareini be'erech ploni. So I will say what I could say hareini be'erki. I am hereby obligated for my value. I can leave out the word alai. I am hereby obligated for the value of ploni. Va'otan, Rabbi Nassan Omer, v'Nassan es ha'erkecha b'yomahu kodesh la'Hashem. The pasuk says, "You shall give the value, right? You shall give your value on that day. It should be kodesh to HaKadosh Baruch Hu." So what does this mean? Ma Talmud Lomar lefi shematzinu bek deishos u'maisros shemischalelin al ma'os shebechulin. So we've learned in other places that what if you have hekdish or maisros that have been deconsecrated on ma'os chulin, nignevu o sha'avdu, and then ultimately the money was stolen or lost. Einon chayev ba'achrayusan. Ultimately, again, I am not chayev for the achrayus. And I was about to say that halacha l'maisa, I am not obligated to go ahead and replace that money. Yochol, Amabeis, I will say, Amabeis, Yochol af zekein. I might have thought that the halacha should be the same thing vis-a-vis erech money. Then maybe once erech money is separated, halacha l'maisa, again, I also should not be obligated if something happens to it. Talmud Lomar, v'Nasan es ha'erkecha. There was the pasuk says, "You shall give your value." Chullin ad she'avo lidei gizbar. Ultimately, again, the money is considered to be chulin until when? Until it reaches the hands of the gizbar. Shabbos means what? Something very interesting by erech money, which is that when you make an erech vow and you separate out that money is your responsibility until it gets to the gizbar. That Allah Chalamai says called quote unquote chulin money until it gets to the gizbar, which means if something happens to it, total liability is on you. Ela I itmar haki itmar. Rather, if you're going to say, here's what you need to say. Amar of Hamnuna, hakamoldim be'erchin. Everyone agrees in cases of erchin. Ta'afa gavdalo amar alai. Even if a person did not say alai, mechayiv. Ultimately, again, a person is chayiv. Dichsev v'nasan es ha'erkecha chulin hein bi'adecha ad she'avol l'digizah. So we'll say, interestingly enough, it turns out, just a side piece of information, that apparently erech vows are just dramatically different. Right? Remember again, a person says, erki alai, my value is upon me. So apparently what the Gemara is saying over here is the way just erech money works is that it is considered to be chulin money until it reaches the hands of the Beis HaMikdash, which, by the way, means a variety of different things on a couple of different levels. It means, let's say my value is $1,000. So I separate out $1,000 from my erech money, and I put it on the kitchen counter. And I will say, then I need to go shopping. So if it's chulin money, what does that mean? That I could use it and replace it. But what it means for our purposes, which is the topic over there we're dealing with, is that if something happens to that money before I get it to the Beis HaMikdash, what is the halacha? Everyone agrees that I'm on the hook to replace it. In other words, we'll say I can't claim that it was Hektish that lost its money, not me. So we'll say, so good. So ultimately, again, just the way the sugya ends off is understanding the takeaway message over here is that birds which are consecrated are not subject to the halachos of Shiluach HaKein. Right? That's the bottom line takeaway message. What we ended up getting into over here, I will say, is a much more fundamental dispute regarding how Hekdish works. And specifically, this fundamental machlokes when it comes to a situation ultimately of Kedushas Haguf versus Kedushas Mamon, when Kedushas Haguf and when Kedushas Mamon both apply, the distinctions ultimately between Alai versus Zeh, and so on and so forth. Fundamental machlokes in Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, as well as between Rav and Shmuel. Incredible. Says the Gemara Baiter. Chomer b'kisui. Tan Rabbanan. Ki karikan sipor lefanecha. So we'll say the pasuk says, if you will come across a bird's nest on the road, not Talmud Lomar. What is the pasuk coming to teach me? Lefisha ne'emar. Since the pasuk says, Shaleach teshalech es ha'im ves habonim tikach lecha. So the pasuk says, you shall send away the mother bird. You shall send away the mother bird, and you shall go ahead and take the chicks for you. V'asabarim tikach lach. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. So let's listen to this. So I might have thought maybe I have an obligation to go out and search for a nest. Right? In other words, once there's a mitzvah asay to send away the mother bird, maybe I'm obligated to go ahead and search out for the nest. Talmud Lomar ki kare. Therefore, the pasuk says ki kare means what? Lashon mikra, when you happen upon. When you happen upon means b'ma'or lefanecha. If you happen to find a nest, here is the obligation, ultimately again that you have, but there is no obligation to search out the nest. Kan, so also when the pasuk says kan, a nest, mikol makom. Rashi says, afilu be'efroach echad o bebeit tzachar. So both say there is no minimum definition of what constitutes a nest. Even one egg, even one chick, ultimately again is a nest. Next, tzipor. Both what I learned from the word tzipor, tahora v'lo tameya. Ultimately, this only applies to kosher birds and not to non-kosher birds. Lifanecha, in front of you. This is actually very interesting. Birshus hayochid. So I'll say ultimately again, this is true. Even if you find the bird birshus yachid. I will say, no, this is actually very interesting. What this means is as follows: that if you find a bird on your property, so I'll say, remember again, without getting too into this right now, halacha l'maisa, a chotzer is only kolna, only acquired if it's mishtameres. Remember this from our Gittin days? Right? Chatzar mishtameres. So only if the chatzar ultimately, again, is guarded, so to speak. We're not going to get into the technicalities over here. Which means that technically speaking, even if you find a bird's nest somewhere on your property, as long as it's not mishtameres, the obligation of shiluach hakan will apply. Baderech, what does Baderech teach me? Birshus harabim. That teaches me that the obligation of shiluach hakan applies even in public domain. Bi'ilanos minayin. How do I know that even if I find the nest in the trees, that there's an obligation. Talmud Lomar bechol eitz. Both say the pasuk says in any tree. Find the nest in any tree. Beboros sichin ma'aros minayin. How do I know that if I find it in pits, cisterns, and caves, that there's an obligation for shiluach hakein as well? Talmud Lomar o al haaretz. So we'll say the pasuk says even if you find the bird's nest on the ground, which really means even in the ground, there's still an obligation of shiluach hakein. V'chimi achar shesof no. The rabbos called davar lefanecha b'derech lamali. Let's listen to this. So now that we see that at the end of the day, we're going to go ahead and include every type of nest. So why does the pasuk need to say baderech? Lomar lecha maderech she'ein kanu biadecha, af kol she'ein kanu biadecha. So we'll say derech teaches me that the same way that if I find something on the road, it is not owned by me. So too, the only time where there is an obligation for shiluach hakein is when the nest is not owned by me. From here we see yone shovach v'yone aliyah. So from here we see that birds, right, literally doves in a dovecote, or doves that have nestled inside of my home, shekanano, right, shekanano, bitfichin ubabiros, right, ultimately again, that I've inquired, or that I've nested, either in tfichin, Rashi says, are ultimately again places in the wall. Babiros, literally again, are in towers. Va'avzin v'tarnagolin shekananu b'paradis, or geese or chickens, which have nested in my fields. Chayiv b'shiluach. So I'll say that's actually very interesting. So here we see an interesting distinction, I will say, which is that halacha l'maisa, essentially, you could, if something is domesticated, and therefore again lives in a place that I have shlita, ownership over, that bird will not be subject to the obligation of shiluach hakein. But if I have something that lives on my property, but I don't really have control over it, even though it's nesting in my property, halacha l'maisa, that will still be subject to shiluach hakein. You hear that interesting distinction? So baderech essentially teaches me, if I own it, it's not obligated in shiluach hakein. If I don't own it, even if it's in my property, halacha l'maisa, it is subject to shiluach hakein. Aval kinenu b'soch habayis, but ultimately again, if it roosted inside of my home, v'cheyone hadresios, and ultimately again these Herodian doves, which we'll discuss, pater mishiluach. Ultimately again, I'm pater mishiluach. Why? Ultimately again, because I own these items. Amar mar. Ma derech she'ein kanu biyadecha, just like the derech which I do not own. Af kol she'ein kanu biyadecha. Ultimately, again, will say the obligation of shiluach hakein applies to any bird that I do not own. Halamali, but I don't understand, why do I need this drasha? After all, michi yikari nafka. Ultimately, again, we'll say, remember again, I learned this out from the pasuk of ki yikari kansibar. Ki yikari will say means what? I don't own it. It happens in front of me. To which the Gemara says, no. Ki kare prat lo mezuman. Ultimately, again, what does ki kare come to go ahead and exclude? It comes to exclude mezuman. Both say something that is already prepared. Va'od lifanecha lamali. Why do I need the phrase lifanecha? Ela lifanecha la'asuye shahayu lifanecha mard. Both listen to this. Lifanecha comes to include that even birds that I once owned and then literally fled. Supposedly, that's very interesting. Birds that I owned, fled, are now free birds. If I come across that bird somewhere, I'm obligated in shiluach. This is actually very interesting. I might have thought that since I once owned the bird, therefore what? Even if it escaped, I should not be chayiv in shiluach. Kamash mola, no. Even if I once owned it, if I now no longer own it, and I come across it, I'm chayiv in shiluach. Baderech. What do I learn from the phrase baderech? Kid Rav Yehuda Marav. Tell me Rav Yehuda Marav. Matzah kan bayam chay b'shach. What's the interesting case? If you find a bird's nest floating on the water, so what's talacha? Rabbi say talacha is you're still chayiv in shiluach. Shne'emar ko amar Hashem hanosin bayam derech. So I'll say, what do you see from this pasuk? That the yam, the sea, is also called derech. So therefore, from the word derech, ultimately by shiluach hakan, I learn that even if you find a bird's nest floating on the water, you are still chayav in shiluach hakan. Ela me'ata matzah kan b'shamayim. We'll say what happens if you find a bird's nest in the sky. So where would you find a bird's nest in the sky?
By the wings, something.
Good, excellent. Or you find another bird carrying it in its beak, right? The bird is carrying a nest. So I'll say, so whatever the case is, the point over here is you find a bird's nest in the sky. So is there an obligation of shiluach hakim there as well? So the Gemara says, "Ela me'atad matzah came b'shayim dichsiv derech nesher b'shamayim." Again, both say it uses the word derech, right? It is the derech of the nesher, the derech of the eagle in the sky. Hachanam d'nichayev shiluach hakan. The Gemara says, no, you're not obligated. Why? Derech nesher ikri, derech stamalo ikri. It's called, right? The sky both says it's called the derech of the eagle, but it's not called derech stam. So because it's not called derech stam, therefore, if you find a bird's nest in the sky, you are not chayiv ultimately in shiluach. To which the Gemara says, so Amrlei paponoilra masna. This is incredible Gemara. Matzah kan birosha shel adamahu. We'll say, what happens if you find a bird's nest on someone's head? Find the bird's nest. Listen to this incredible case. Bird's nest on someone's head. What's ta'alacha? Is there an obligation of shiluach hakan in this situation? Amar, listen to this. Va'adama al rosho. He said yes. Why? Because the pasuk says that the earth was on his head. I will say, so the Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk from Shmuel. The earth was on his head. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see that it's still called Adama when it's on the head of a person. Look at Rashi. Rashi's right across. Va'adama al rosho afa pi shahaya b'rosho lo avda es shma. We'll say, listen to this. Even though the earth is detached, that dirt is detached from the earth and is sitting on top of someone's head, it is still called Adama. Shmamina, Adam Gufei Adamahu. So what do you learn from this? That Adam in his essence is called earth. Midlo Avda es Shma. Delo Karya Afar. Vahashtanami ala Aretz Karina Bear. Both say, do you want to hear something absolutely amazing? If there is a bird's nest on the head of a person, ultimately, again, that is still considered to be on the ground. Why? Because a person is Adama. See, Rabbi says something absolutely amazing. We're always Adama. The shaila is, are you mechuber lekarka or are you detached from the karka? And Rabbi say the nafkamina is, if there's a bird's nest on my head, is the bird's nest considered to be at rest on the ground, or is it considered to be detached? The Gemara seems to say over here that we paskin that halacha l'maisa more often than not, a person defines himself as Adama, and therefore the bird's nest is considered to be attached to the ground, and therefore halacha l'maisa there be an obligation of shiluach hakein. We'll say, what an incredible idea. Incredible, we'll have to ask ourselves every single day, am I mechuber lekarka or not? Am I Adama? You know, Rabbi Yitzchak has this drasha. The pasuk in Tehillim says, Adameh lekel elyon. So we'll say same letters, Adameh and Adama. Aleph, Dalid, Mem, Hey. They mean two different things. Adama means earth. Adameh means I will resemble HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I will say this is the decision we must make each and every day. Am I an Adama or am I an Adameh? Am I earth or do I resemble HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We'll say one more. Moshe min Atami. So we'll say the Gemara just when it says this, now we just do a little bit of a drashas over here. Where do we find a remez to Moshe Rabbeinu? In other words, where do we find a remez to Moshe Rabbeinu before Moshe is ever mentioned? So the Gemara says, B'shagam hu basar. Both sides, the word B'shagam is the same gematria as Moshe, 345. So B'shagam hu basar, Kadosh Baruch Hu saying there will be one who is made of flesh, who will be different than everyone else. Ultimately, again, that's reference to Moshe. Haman min haTorah minayin. Where do we find the reference to Haman? The Gemara says, Hamin ha'etz. This is amazing. Hamin ha'etz. So this is by Adam and Chava when he confronts them about eating the fruit. We'll say you can listen to the shir I gave. I mamish talk about this pasuk. You can go back. It's online. Purim shir that I gave mamish on this about Hamin ha'etz. Right? Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from? Esther min haTorah minayin. Where do we find the remes to Esther? Va'anochi hastir astir. I will go ahead and hide my face. By the Tochacha, that's Esther Malka. The story of Purim is one of Hester Panim, one of where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will hide his face. Mordechai min haTorah minayin. Where do we find the remes to Mordechai? Dichsiv mar d'ror. By the Ketores. By the Ketores, mar d'ror. which ultimately again is one of the ingredients of the Ketores. And how does the Targum go ahead and translate? Mira Dachya. That's the Targum. Mira Dachya, we'll say if you put those words together, what do you get? Mordechai. So the remes to Mordechai ultimately is from the Ketores. The remes to Esther is V'anochi Hastir Astir. The remes to Moshe is B'Shagam Hu Basar. Remember again, that pasuk is Vayomer Hashem Lo Yadan Ruchi Ba'adam Li'olam B'Shagam Hu Basar Vayomav Meves Mishana Basar. This is after the Mabul. After the Mabul, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is upset, he says ultimately again, my presence will not rest on man. But obviously there's an exception. The exception is the one who will be b'shagam hu basar. Who is the one whose presence HaKadosh Baruch Hu will rest upon? The shagam, 345. Moshe, 345. That's Shemes to Moshe. So we'll have to stop over here. We'll pick up Yemir Hashem at the 2 dots tomorrow. Shkoyach.